Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. In hundreds of locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/bluewire to learn more and find a center near you. That's unifydhealing.com/bluewire. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including EE System.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Robin. Welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, June 20th, 2024, as the Chicago White Sox just wrapped up their series against the Houston Astros. Surprise! They lost another series. The White Sox haven't won a series since taking 2 out of 3 against the Washington Nationals a month ago. They are now 20-56 as the midseason point of 2024 is coming up. Chris Getz has a lot on his plate. Currently, the MLB Draft Combine is underway in Phoenix at Chase Field, in which many of the July's draft class prospects are participating in drills and interviews. Then there is the trade market. We haven't seen any huge movement yet, but the White Sox have some pieces that other teams want. We'll share our White Sox trade power rankings on the players we believe that are available to be dealt. But Getz did speak to the media on Tuesday and was asked about his feelings of the current ball club.
Yeah, I think the team as a whole, although the record's not very good, I think the intent, the energy, playing for the White Sox and for each other, I sense a lot of positives in that. Have there been inconsistencies, whether it be with the fundamental breakdowns and whether it be on the base running or defensive side? Yeah, that's popped up more than I would have liked. It's obviously nice to have Louis Robert back into the lineup. He's already shown what he's, accustomed to doing and capable of doing both defensively and offensively. So I think, we're certainly going to benefit from having him regularly in the lineup now, and having Tommy Pham back and Benny as well, I think will position us better. But we really focused on the pitching this year and finding ways to improve our starting pitching. And you look at our rotation, there's some pitchers that have thrown really well as starters, here recently, and we want to continue to build on that and bring up potentially some players from the minor leagues to add to our starting rotation or in the bullpen or various spots on the position player front. So, you kind of zoom out and you focus on, ways to continue to build this organization to where it needs to go. And on that subject, looking at, Kannapolis and winning the first half was certainly a highlight for our player development group and Pat Leland and his staff. Really happy for those guys, and there's always great benefit for our players to experience chasing the championship at the minor league level. And this week in Birmingham, it's going to be an exciting week. They're facing an opponent that's also battling for first place in their division, and we've got Iriarte throwing tonight at Birmingham, and look forward to seeing how it unfolds this week for that club. So I think that's a positive step in the right direction. on the development of our players and certainly the direction of the organization as a whole. And then additionally, we're prepping for the draft right now. But so there are plenty of positives and certainly some too many areas right now that need improvement, and so work closely with our staff and build strategies for us to get better.
Naturally, Getz was also asked about manager Pedro Grifol's job status.
Pedro, and I are still, talking regularly, and like I said earlier, we're trying to put our players in the best position we can, for not only be successful this year, but in the coming years. So, there's a lot of work to be done, whether it be, on our major league staff or with our front office to take steps forward. So I know that naturally there's a lot of speculation on who's going to be in what role in future years, and really it's about showing up each day and figuring out how to put our players in the best position possible.
If managers were simply fired based on their record, Grifol would be out. But not with the White Sox. So how is Chris Getz grading Pedro Grifol's work as manager?
Yeah, I look at the progress of our players individually. Obviously, there's a huge component is playing together as a team. But really, if we're getting the most out of our players at each position and every spot on a pitching staff, you're going to be in a good position to get a lot of wins. There's a long list of players that are playing well. Some players that haven't played up to their standard or what we expected, and that's just kind of part of baseball in general. But you show up the next day and you continue to fight to get better. And we certainly believe in a lot of the players that we have here, and we work. We continue to work together and trying to find ways for us to get better.
Losing this often takes a toll on any athlete, and eventually quality of play suffers. Getz addresses that concern and how the White Sox were upfront with key offseason additions about what this season could be.
I know, we were very intentional with some of the individuals we brought in, knowing that this season could be a tough one. And you look at Paul DeYoung and how professional he's been, and the at-bats that he's been putting together, and he's been commanding the middle infield, which is what we expected. To grab players to come in here that could face adversity, because they've done that before and they know what it takes to navigate a major league season. And you look at Eric Fetty and what he's done. He had obviously had a tremendous season last year in the KBO, and had a track record of being a major league pitcher, and to see what he's doing here. But these leader types, these veteran types, to come in to help bring along and develop some of these younger players was something that we were set out to do, and I highlight that because walking through the clubhouse and seeing the work in the cages and the side sessions and batting practice, they're still very determined, regardless of some of the tough losses that they've experienced this year, and I expect nothing less from them moving forward, regardless of the noise or distractions. You've got we're nearing the trade deadline, and there's certainly been a lot of interest on our players, and we'll have ongoing conversations, and there's times where I'll pull a player aside and I know that they're reading, or their family's reading, some of the rumors that are out there, and I try to be as upfront as I can, and let them know whether there's truth to it or not, just so they can so we can once again put them in a good position to have a successful night.
Finally, Getz was asked about the current trade market status and how it could impact his plans if the White Sox were willing or able to move Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet.
Tough to tell. The easiest way to assess the pace in which this will move will be certainly the other side and their interest. I know there's plenty of teams, if we felt like the offer was to the point where it's something that we can't really wait around on, we'll do that. I mean, I know that there's a pace to the 12-month cycle. You've got the off season, you've got spring training, you've got the first half and the second half. we've really, had ongoing conversations since last fall with a lot of our players, and we feel like it's an opportunity to improve the health of our organization long term. We're going to do that.
As you get calls on players who have maybe multiple years of control left, do you have to weigh that would send a message to whether the fans or the clubhouse that, hey, we expect to be down for a couple more years after this? Or does that maybe, on the flip side, weigh into looking for guys who can help you near term if you do weigh trading players like that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, be honest with yourself and the organization of where the talent lies. And you look at, our minor league system and obviously our farm system has been improving and I think the industry has us towards the top. We want to continue to add to that. You look at, all right, where does that talent lie within the farm system? When do we feel like they can be productive major league players? And you try to match that up with some of the players that are currently on our major league roster. And, you've got to, that's all part of the calculus. And even though there are some players with some control, that's also when they often are most valuable as well, and the return can be substantial. There's a couple different factors that go into it. We do recognize that it's likely that there are players with control on our major league club right now that perhaps won't be with us, long term. But that's something that we're continuing to assess. And we'll continue to do that for the coming weeks here.
We've given Jim Margulis the weekend off because he deserves it. So joining me for the next couple of episodes of the Sox Machine podcast is Sox Machine's beat reporter, James Fegan. And hello, James. Let's get started with the breaking news, the hot topic in the city of Chicago. What are your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls trading Alex Caruso to Oklahoma City? See, I asked that question because I knew that would be your reaction. You'd be like, oh.
I don't like the return. I'm not high on Giddy for multiple reasons, basketball and otherwise. I don't look forward to explaining this trade to my mom. But I am a little bit torn in the sense that I think it's valuable to provide an entertaining product to the fan base night in, night out. Not that I think the recent Bulls teams have necessarily accomplished that. But it's not I just think anyone who wants the team to be entertaining and watchable for a season is stupid and naive and deserves to be mocked. So yeah, the Bulls were probably more watchable this year, down the stretch at least, because Alex Caruso was there and not because they had already flicked them for draft picks. But now that they're tearing down completely, yeah, it seems like a big asset misfire to not have traded him sooner, when there was more value, when there was, you could actually take picks in the draft, although this draft is not super strong. It's coming up to, and that have to take kind of a post-hype prospect type of return, with no picks attached. Even if this was a particularly bad return, even in that realm, it just makes it's going to make it sting a bit more that it seems like they could have gotten, a couple of firsts or, one first and something more, something that's more inspiring to get behind as a plan than maybe we can make Josh Giddy get it good again, which
was he ever good?
Well, it was more maybe when there was optimism about where he was headed, rather than now. I can see the logic. He's certainly going to put up bigger numbers on the team that has no players who have any offensive responsibilities other than Kobe White. But they got a lot of guys who are tall, kind of wing players and can't shoot. And now we got one who's questionable.
Awesome.
Not enthusiastic.
So that's the Chicago Bulls talk. But I asked this question because James is a big Bulls fan. And I asked it in a way as a joke, but this is our central theme for this particular episode, because we are coming up halfway of the season, halfway done with the 2024 season, which bless up. But this is going to be a very busy 30 days for Major League Baseball front offices. The draft combine is wrapping up in Phoenix. The College World Series championship is going to be this weekend. So you still have scouts in Omaha watching very talented Tennessee and Texas A&M players, a lot of second, third round targets there. And then there's the trade market, which is starting to pick up some steam. We haven't seen any big moves, but there's plenty of rumors out there. So, James, from a White Sox perspective, I guess we can use this as an opportunity to preemptively answer questions that might be on the minds of White Sox fans, especially post Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn era. Do we have any insight in who is handling what for the White Sox? And for Chris Getz, what is his biggest priority now?
Who is handling what in terms of, I mean, I don't think that there's going to be any like split in trades getting approved with like out Chris Getz's say so, like seemed to be the issue last deadline.
Well, that's a good point. Like Kenny Williams made the Jake Berger trade, right? With or without Rick Hahn's knowledge or approval or buy-in. So, I mean, that is a good point. So if there's any trades made, it's Chris Getz that's pulling the trigger, and he would know, and nobody else is making those trades. So that's good. That's a good start.
But I don't think it would be and I don't think it would be unexpected either. Especially as this is a team that some dealt with the Diamondbacks already since this new regime took over, that there are meaningful certain areas, especially with him being like, a farm director himself, where, Josh Barfield has like insight or on a player, or has scouting reports on a player, has like context with people who are, involved or have overlooked or, were part of drafting and developing like a prospect target they have. And that being like something that weighs in heavily to why they do a deal. I think, especially with how much like he's been speaking to the vision of the team and where the direction is, and seemingly in lockstep with Getz, I don't think some level of work share is like means like a power struggle. I just think they should lean on the fact that they do have guys from different organizations who can maybe get the ball rolling in some fashion, or provide some specific insight, or talk about a player that they know is would be possibly available, or is trending the right way, and that filters into a larger process that still actually gets his approval in some sort of healthy way, rather than just every time different pieces of the front office are involved, we are naturally suspicious of what does this mean about the power struggle. But at the same time, that means, something could bubble up from a conversation that involves Tony La Russa, who's as connected as anyone in baseball. So we'll see how much that weighs in, or how much that's contributed. I bet, knowing this front office, and they're pretty wise as the temperature of the situation, they'll probably not like push that super hard in public narrative. Like, we did this, we got this guy because Tony loves him. I don't imagine them doing that, as much as they would say like, yeah, Josh Barfield's really familiar with Dominic Fletcher. I think they're wise enough with the fan base that they know how to message things a little bit, but it wouldn't be unforeseen, even some of the, seemingly Rick Hahn hires, like when he hired Ethan Katz, Tony knew him through people that Tony knew in the Giants, and his approval, and the endorsement that he got went a long way to Katz being hired, even if he's kind of seen as like somebody that Hahn brought in. He's got influence.
I did not know that about La Russa and Katz. Well, with the draft combine, because you got a chance to talk to Chris Getz, and that was the beginning part of this episode earlier this week. And thank you for asking my question to Getz, because I was naturally curious, when are you going to Arizona for the draft combine? And the reason I wanted that question asked, James, is that this is the first MLB draft for Chris Getz. And unfortunately for the White Sox, this draft grows more in importance with each passing week, with how the current team is playing and what the future outlook is, and the fact that Getz really didn't want to address that point, plant a flag, and when the next time White Sox fans could expect them to be competitive, because you might be moving the goalpost depending on how things go from season to season. So I understand why Getz didn't want to plant that flag, but I was wondering, he had to go in the past, right? Because with the director of player development, I'm assuming, again, I could be wrong, for sure Mike Shirley was in Arizona at the draft combine. And I'm assuming Paul Janisch, the new director of player development for the White Sox, was also in Arizona. Now, if I'm wrong about Paul Janisch, this puts a lot of pressure on Mike Shirley to not screw this up. And maybe that is a refreshing change of pace for the White Sox when it does come to the draft, that Mike Shirley is leading that cause. just with 4 picks in the top 80 this year and not having a top 10 pick next year because of the MLB draft lottery. That's where, James, I wanted you to ask that question because I was curious on how Chris Getz was looking at it. And my assumption is, another assumption, is that Chris Getz is really focused right now on nailing the trades that are coming up for the White Sox.
I think that's part of it. He definitely referenced the fact that like those conversations are going on right now. One thing that's reassuring for Shirley is that there's, a lot of pressure on him to not screw up no matter who's at the draft combine, because this is just a very vital draft. One thing I would specify is I think like the GM would have input on like what the big allotment is and direction is for like certainly the first round pick, second round pick, those sorts of things that like direct like the bulk of their draft capital and where they're dedicating the resources are. I think like the most prominent, especially the first round pick, the 5th overall pick, that evaluation is so much bigger than, it's not really influenced by the combine. I think like the biggest combine story we could really cite to is like a guy that they really identified and drafted because of how he performed the combine was when they drafted Tanner McDougal and gave him like big overslot money. I want to say on the 5th round. I think that's more the tier that you really find like combine guys where you are identifying like who's your second day picks that you're going to like dedicate most of your overslot to. Those are the guys who kind of jump, like seeing them perform or seeing their metrics or seeing how they stack up against competition. Some way that like their profile didn't already have them in that, $1 million range or, high 6-figure range, and the combine really fortified it. I think that's kind of going to be the realm of scouting director Mike Shirley more than like, this is the big organizational decision anyway. So for me, it's not, I guess, stunning that Getz, especially not being like, if he was the amateur scout director and they promoted him to GM, yeah, you'd expect them to have a lot more like, thumbprint on the draft. But I think given where the combine is going to really affect their draft, I think it's already in a territory that would really be Shirley driven. But it also shows, at least outwardly to us, a good endorsement that he, trusts the people below him. And, this is not something he needs to dedicate his attention away from trade talk was. And something I asked repeatedly, and I think we all know it's going to be the case, is that, the biggest trades are not really going to pop off until after the draft. But Getz really tried to sell the idea of like, hey, we're open now. We can do stuff now. He said, we're plenty capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time, which I thought was surely something that White Sox fans would debate in previous years.
Yeah.
And, it showed some self-awareness for him to assert that, yes, we are not going to be tunnel vision on this.
Well, I mean, they have a smaller front office, and that is still a concern if they're like spread too thin. Because in order for Chris Getz to nail the trades, James, he's going to need to pull scouts off of what they're currently doing. And hey, I need you to go watch San Diego Padres prospects, or I need you to go watch Dodgers prospects, because we could be working something here. And I need your guys' input so we don't screw this up. I could definitely see that. And then you have your draft people and your draft scouts debating. There's a lot of work right now, from now until right before the All-Star break, as the Major League Baseball draft is Sunday, July 14th. And then you have the All-Star break, which for some people, they get to have a breather. But no, I think Chris Getz is going to be putting in 10, 12-hour days from now all the way to the trade deadline. And on the flip side, so that's the front office perspective and what they are currently doing. Then there's the players that are going to be involved.
The pro scouting staff has been looking at prospects all year. There has not been a single week that was dedicated to adding at the deadline. And what do we need to look at? Nobody has wasted a single minute on like pro scouting potential trade deadline additions.
Now, on the flip side, the players' point of view, and you wrote an excellent column about this on SoxMachine.com earlier in the week. Key players, and we'll be talking about this when I present my White Sox trade power rankings. They're aware that they're part of these trade conversations already. In your experience covering the White Sox, when players are involved in trade rumors, has their on the field activity or their on the field play ever been impacted for better or worse once they start getting tied to trade rumors?
It really depends on the guy. Certainly, yes. I think prominent examples. I think it weighed a lot on Jose Quintana in 2017 as his contract extension talks did. Some guys it bothered them, but they still performed. And some guys, they're like Paul DeYoung, who basically said after last year, it really threw me when I got traded at the deadline. I'd been to the Cardinals my entire life, and I went to two organizations and 2 months after playing my entire career here. And this year I kind of am playing better because I know I've been through it. I knew I had to really be individually focused, knowing that I'm going to a team and it's a new environment and I have to get used to playing in new environments because I'm going to bounce around more. And he feels like he's kind of thriving right now because he was prepared for what it was going to be. And he feels like he's in a better place for, what comes this offseason, which is not going to take him by surprise. So I think it depends a lot on individuals, and I think it depends a lot whether they've experienced this before and just kind of how they're wired. Some guys do great in contract years. Some guys feel like they have all the pressure in the world to support their family on their shoulders and when it's on the line. So I think it varies, but certainly it can. I think these guys are all humans. They're all under a lot of pressure, and they all get weird DMs from people about gambling. So I think they feel it when they're performing and when they're not performing all the time. And it can be a factor, but I think there's a broad spectrum of dudes. I think Garrett Crochet is probably one. This is the first time he's really been the target of it, but also maybe not something he necessarily foresaw being something that this deadline was going to be about in spring training, and then it could be more new to him. I think he's handling it pretty great, but I think he's getting a different level of input or feedback, or just how much it's taking him by surprise, than somebody like Tommy Pham, who I'm sure before he even signed this contract was foreseeing the day that he was traded by the White Sox. He's literally in this exact position last season. I don't think this is a new entry into his process or what he's dealing with mentally and the slightest.
Yeah, Eric Fetty. I mean, you got a great quote from Fetty in your column in December in Nashville. It was between the White Sox and the Mets, and he signed with the White Sox for that opportunity to start every fifth day and not even make it to the halfway point. And it's almost for certain that Fetty's getting traded. And yeah, I'm sure he wasn't imagining that when he signed with the White Sox back in December. He's probably just happy he's coming back to the major leagues, and now he's got to get ready to be dealt. And that's a great way to move on to our next topic. But we're going to take a quick moment for a word from our sponsors. But coming up next, we'll share our White Sox trade power rankings. Where does Garrett Crochet fit? Eric Fetty fits with the trade targets the White Sox are currently working with, and which players we think are most likely will be dealt before the deadline, and what other GMs of other teams will be calling about to Chris Getz. We'll talk about Jonathan Cannon's terrific start against the Houston Astros and preview the upcoming White Sox versus Tigers series this weekend, next on the Sox Machine Podcast. This episode is presented by Game Time, who is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. They make getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. The Chicago White Sox are in Detroit this weekend to face the Tigers, and Game Time has great deals if you decide to make the trek to the Motor City. Or you can wait and take advantage of the upcoming homestand when the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Atlanta Braves, and the Colorado Rockies visit for a 7-game homestand. Lots of star power coming through Guarantee Ray Field, especially a chance to watch Shohei Ohtani hit some bombs against White Sox pitching. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine Podcast. Before we get to the trade power rankings, also plugging other work that we've done this week on SoxMachine.com. Jim Margulis got a chance to go down to Birmingham and cover the minor league baseball part of the Rickwood Classic, which many of you have gotten a chance to watch that game on Fox. Highly recommended, as Jim got awesome pictures of the stadium. And I also think he posed a lot of questions like, this is a great event that Major League Baseball is doing, but what is the future of the stadium? And we'll be in touch with Jonathan Nelson, the president and GM of the Birmingham Barons, because the Barons have been hosting games at that stadium for many years now. And I thought the event was great. Getting a chance to watch it on Fox would be great if Major League Baseball revisited in the future. For the White Sox, again, it's all focused on trades and what they're going to be doing in the next month here before the trade deadline on July 30th. And I thought it'd be worthwhile to create a power rankings list to track on who are the most desired players that other teams are calling and texting Chris Getz about right now and wanting to make a deal. And I have 7 players to start, and we can add to this list over the weeks, and we can maybe pull players off the list as well. Last week, or I should say a couple weeks ago, I probably had Tim Hill on my power rankings list, but he got DFA'd by the White Sox, removing off that list. And then he got signed by the New York Yankees, and I think he allowed a home run in his first appearance. So it's going great, James. The Tim Hill experience is going great for the Yankees.
0 earned runs. There are 2 errors in that inning.
Huzzah! So the trade power rankings, I've got 7 players, and we start at the top, which I think is the most desired player, all the way to number 7. And starting at number 1, James, I have Luis Robert Jr. Number 2, I have Garrett Crochet. 3, I have Eric Fetty. And then you have your 1-year replacements, short-term rentals. At number 4, Tommy Pham. Number 5, Paul DeYoung. I have Michael Kopech 6 on the power rankings list for me right now, and John Brabius 7th, as he is a short-term reliever. Anyone that I'm missing out of those 7? Is this longer than what I originally drew up?
I mean, it certainly can be. I would say, like, I think you have the top 7 in terms of like likelihood up there. I think usually, or at least in the past, maybe I'm just like extrapolating the Tommy Kahnle trade too far, but I think normally they're more willing to yield control and relievers than maybe we would think, just because like the volatility is such that even if you have control of a Steven Wilson for 4 more or 3 more seasons after this, you're not really going to like put a peg in like the 29-year-old maintaining it. Of course, Steven Wilson has been on the IL and like just got back and has had like 4 outings since, and like 3 of them have been weird. He's certainly throwing harder, but I don't know if he's necessarily put together the string of outings there. Like, this is a functional, playoff roster caliber reliever just yet. It's just more just like he looks healthy, but it's hard to just basically give it a great assessment of how he's pitching based on how he's come back. But I think if he like puts together a good 4 or 5 weeks, this is a guy who has put together a couple good medium relief seasons before, and he seems like he's back to doing it again. I think he'd be somebody that they could probably put in a deal and get something for, and probably wouldn't be disinclined against doing. He's 29 years old already. Nicky Lopez does not have good offensive stats, but my argument would just be he got traded last year and he didn't have good offensive stats. It wasn't necessarily for anything significant, but teams will be like, we need somebody to play the middle infield, handle it defensively, especially a playoff team that would be acquiring him that isn't necessarily asking for offense and really can, put together a credible 9 without needing a ton out of Lopez. It wouldn't be like a substantive move, but I wouldn't rule it out. Perhaps a little bit with his arbitration figure makes it a little bit less likely because maybe you don't want to pay like $1 million for your defense-oriented replacement, but I would at least think it's possible with him. I tried to play the same song and dance with myself with Martin Maldonado based on playoff experience, but I can't get there. I don't think that's what's going to happen. Maybe it wouldn't be like the most surprising thing that's ever happened to me, but it'd be the most surprising thing of the season.
Yeah,
there'd be a lot of Twitter jokes about it.
If Maldonado got traded, I don't know what the reaction would be. Would it be celebration because Pedro Grifol won't play him as often because he's not on the team?
It'd be like befuddlement, I guess.
I guess somebody wanted him. Yeah. Then I don't know who is the
It would be like
catcher.
the sort of team that can credibly say, like, yeah, we really don't care. Just like the Astros did, for so many years. Like, we're so stacked in our top 8. We just need somebody to catch. We got an injury. We need someone to catch 2 days a week. we know he'll run the game, do it, as opposed to the worst offense in baseball doing it. You never know. It won't be like a valuable return. It's not like they'll get Fernando Tatis Jr. the third.
Is
like
there a third?
That level of like weird, like under the radar prospect for it. But like Martin Maldonado for cash considerations, not impossible. Not impossible.
All right, so let's keep this list of 7, but I think you made good cases for like Steven Wilson. Let's check back in with him in a couple of weeks to see if he's pitching better. That might draw more interest. Nicky Lopez, I think you make a good argument. That could be like a last minute deal if somebody wants a better defensive utility infielder than what they currently have on their bench. And yeah, we'll see about Martin Maldonado. So we'll stick with this list of 7. So the next step is assigning the trade probabilities. Now I have 3 levels of probabilities. High, we're almost certain this player is getting traded before the deadline. Medium, a 50-50 chance. Low, they're probably not going to get traded. So starting with Luis Robert Jr., James, I want to put a low probability on Robert because there was a report from The Athletic Thursday morning where they got quotes from 2 rival executives stating that Chris Getz right now might be overvaluing Luis Robert, as he should, because there's so much team control, and the White Sox know and benefited from Robert's 2023 season. But from an outside perspective of Chicago, there's just too much risk, especially in the injury front, to give up a organization's top prospects. And then to watch Robert go back on the injured list in a couple of weeks due to another leg issue. That's the fear of trying to meet Getz's price. And this has not been a great month of June hitting wise for Luis Robert. And watching him on Tuesday, he's still not 100% physically, as many singles from the Astros batters fell short of Robert, where I thought when he's healthy, he makes those catches. But right now, again, I just don't think he's 100% healthy, and he's grinding out and trying to help the team right now. So I give it the probability low that Luis Robert Jr. is traded before the deadline. Do you agree? Do you disagree with the low probability?
Yeah, like I think that's right. The low value thing is a good point. I think also just you have him like the ranking is like, I think he's more valuable than like Garrett Crochet or Eric Petty. I don't think he's more desirable because of the level of control. He's just like so expensive that it like is such a commitment of prospect bandwidth that would be necessary to like get something that's fair, and Getz can't move off the line that he has for it just because like he's at low value. Like the counter argument to like, hey, he's been injured and he's not like, his timing isn't back yet, I'm not paying up for this, is like, well, I'll just wait until he is and I'll trade him at that point. Like that's the luxury that he has. And so like I don't think he should necessarily discount it based off of what he's done in his first 3 months, because this is not like a toxic asset. So I already think like just the high price and how many like mediocre farm systems that would like eliminate from the bidding reduces the probability to go on the idea that like, it'd be more likely you can get really the offer you want if he was, basically having last season, this season. I think that combined to push it to low, even if I don't think it's a unwillingness or uncertainty about how long it's going to take to rebuild this that's keeping him. It's not like, oh, we're sure we're going to be good in 2027, so we don't want to get rid of Robert. I don't think that's the case.
Right. So moving over to Garrett Crochet, I have a medium trade probability, like 50-50 chance that he can be dealt before the deadline. Speaking to a Dodger source, the Dodgers could be interested in a month, but they're wary of the amount of innings that Crochet has already thrown. But, you can't ever count out AJ Preller and the San Diego Padres. They have made so many of these blockbuster trades before the deadline. And I could definitely see the Padres being interested. I could almost see every National League team being interested, James, because even if you are worried about the innings limit for Crochet, especially this being his first full season as a starting pitcher, when you get into crunch time in the National League, you better have an elite left-hander coming out of that bullpen to face the Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman. Like, I can see the National League contending teams get in line. And this is how Crochet helps us this season. And we know that we can plug him into our starting rotation, as he'll have a full offseason to prepare after starting X amount of games in 2024. So that may give teams more confidence to try to make this move now rather than waiting into the offseason. So I give it a 50-50 shot. I'm not 100% certain Crochet is going to get dealt. He currently ranks second, by the way, according to Fangraphs, in WAR. Crochet's already at 2.9 WAR for the season. So how do you feel about the trade probability for Crochet?
I think that's right too. I certainly, from what Getz is saying publicly and just what I've heard, I think there's definitely the willingness to move him. I think they kind of view it as like this has been like a magic mystery box for 2-3 years, and all of a sudden it's valuable. Maybe let's act on this before it turns into a magic mystery box again. And certainly not like the level of certainty that they would, with only 2 years of control, that they would be ready within the time span he's here. And it really doesn't sound like from either side there's any smoke on the extension front. So
well, how much is that on Jerry Reinsdorf, though? Because we know that they've done these extensions in the past, but it feels so long ago, James, when the White Sox did this, and the league has changed. Like, I don't know. Have you heard anything? Are there rumors, grumblings from Crochet's side that they would be interested in signing a contract extension with the White Sox?
Not particularly. It's not really like, I can't say I've ever encountered like CAA's posture being like, boy, we'd sure love an extension. That usually is
he is with CAA. Yeah.
Smaller shops who are more like, this is a player we've represented since his like origin, and we're really kind of happy to be here. Like, I think talking to Tim about it back like a few years after it happened, he was like very much like once he was at a place with where he went through to get to the league, like he was very much like all in once they said that they were interested in contract extension talks. Like he said, like, get a fair deal, negotiate all you can, but like be sure we do the deal when they're done, was his message to his agent. And I don't think like we get here with Crochet if that's was the way like that they were approaching these things. So I think there's a lot of reasons to wonder like when the next White Sox extension is, like because of they're kind of openly changing their TV revenue and openly telling us like, yeah, we really need that new stadium if you want us to contend. It doesn't seem like a time where they're adding a lot, so it could just be from their end that nothing is really percolating on that. But I love watching Garrett. He's done great work. He's looks really strong. He's been really durable this year. He does not have the track record that says like this guy's nails to be healthy 3-4 years out. Like that's not what his career has been. He had a little shoulder hiccup when he was in Tennessee, like that delayed his like draft year a season. He had the forearm strain when his first year as the White Sox. He's had TJ, and he had shoulder stuff that popped up during the rehab last year. It's certainly not like, as much as like every pitcher just goes through stuff at this point, it's not like the spotless profile to say like, yeah, for sure 5 years from now he'll still be doing this. No way. So I think it makes sense, but it's and I think there's certainly an interest in profile to say like, hey, this is somebody who will be an absolute weapon out of the bullpen for us in the playoffs and down the stretch. And then we got 2 years of a really good starter. Like that's a really valuable asset, but it is uncertain enough. And it is like a weird enough situation and unique to value it, where I put it like 50-50, where it's more complicated. Whereas like everybody else, the next 3 or 4 guys we're going to discuss are like as simple and straightforward as a deadline trade as you can imagine. Whereas these are like a lot of like room for disconnect between how orgs value guys that could come into play. The different computers could fight really hard over the first 2 guys, whereas it's a little bit more simple on the next 4.
Yeah. So let's talk about Eric Fetty. Shocking. He ranks 16th in Major League Baseball right now in WAR. He's got 2.1 WAR according to Fangraphs. He's 24th in FIP. His FIP is 3.44. There was a gap earlier this season for Eric Fetty, and that's why like Baseball Reference has him over 3 WAR already this season, but Fangraphs was slow to catch up because of the gap in FIP. Well, right now, Fangraphs views Eric Fetty, depending on the metric, either a top 20 or top 25 starting pitcher in Major League Baseball, and he's been able to calm down the splits when you look at OPS against right-handed hitters, where righties are have an OPS of just 622, and lefties have an OPS below 700 right now against Fedde. They're at 687, and Fedde's just owed $7.5 million in 2025. So I have this as high. Based on your answer, you're also high as well for Fedde being traded.
Yeah, like I haven't seen like other national writers go high. Everyone's like moderate, and I don't know why, but I see it as pretty high. He's a good starter. His like everything looks legit. He's been doing it for 2 years now. There's a track record KBO. Tweak guys coming over here and doing really well. It's not expensive. Year and a half. He's like perfect, mid rotation. He's not like a game one starter, but like someone you can see like for a playoff team pitch starting game 2 or 3 and not feeling too bad about it at all. Probably feeling great about it if it's like game 3. And he's 31. He's a great guy to deal with. He's a great guy in the clubhouse. He really knows how to pitch. Like I could see him having like a Merrill Kelly like run where he's like really pretty effective guy for
Good comp.
4 or 5 more years, even, and has like kind of this whole second career. But it's 31 and only like a year and a half. It'd be a lot more expensive like in a year from now, like after the end of next season, which is when like it'd be important for you to have like the starting pitcher if you wanted to retain him. And Fedde has like repeatedly said like post game like that they sent him back out for an extra inning, and it's like, yeah, I know my role in this team is like soak up a lot of innings. They've talked to me about it a lot. Like that's important. And like that's like a really holistic way to look at like this rotation when you're like 2 good starters are Crochet and Fedde. And Crochet is obviously not going to be the one who like gives you the 7th, 8th inning multiple times. Like you're managing those innings already. Fedde kind of has to be the one for that, but they're not like managing him like we got to keep him healthy for 2026, guys. Like that's not the way they're using him. They're like, this is a guy who's ready to go deep for us, and we're going to do it. So I don't feel like anything is super future looking with how they have Fedde. So I'm willing to go high. It just seems like an obvious get for a lot of teams, some of which I have scouting buddies on who have asked me about him. So I don't think those questions are out of natural curiosity. So I think he's probably pretty high up there.
So we can combine these two, Tommy Pham and Paul DeJong. We talked about Atlanta. You brought it up in our last podcast episode about Michael Harris's injury. I'm kind of shocked Tommy Pham is not with Atlanta at this moment. But I view, even if he does join a contending team, that they may covet his postseason experience, especially with how well he played for Arizona in the World Series last year, that he could be a good 4th outfielder option and be starting most of the time in a pinch if somebody gets hurt. Same thing with Paul DeJong. In the last 30 days, only Aaron Judge and Anthony Santander have hit more homers in the American League than Paul DeJong. But I still view him more likely like a veteran bench bat for a contender.
He's a supercharged version of why like Nicky Lopez would get traded. Like just having someone who could manage any manila infield position like competently on a pinch, and now this guy could actually like hit a home run in like the 1 or 2, 3 starts that we could give him, and he's making barely over the like not even making $2 million. You would owe him less than $1 million for the rest of the year. Like that just seems like an automatic for somebody, like not even necessarily somebody who has a need at shortstop for every guy, but just like we can put him anywhere in the infield. We'll get average to above average play, and he can like provide meaningful power for us, like lower in the lineup. That seems automatic to me.
And then there's the relievers, Michael Kopech and John Brabia. I want to start with Brabia. I think this is certain high. In June, Brabia's only allowed 1 earned run. He's got 14 strikeouts to just 1 walk this month, and that's in 9 appearances covering 7 2/3 innings. Now, there's some weird money situation with Brabia. So there's a mutual option for 2025, which is $6 million. And if a team doesn't pick that up, he gets a $1.5 million buyout. So there's that buyout part in a future trade. There's also incentives for this season. So when Brabia hits game 45, game 50, game 55, game 60, he earns an additional $250,000 in incentives. And right now he's on pace in 2024 to reach 65 appearances. So that's another $1 million that John Brabia can earn this year. But despite the weird incentives and the buyout and maybe some negotiating whether or not the White Sox eat some of that cash, depending on the prospects they want in return for Bravia, I view Bravia as like certain that he's getting dealt before the deadline, James.
Yeah, I would think I think that's kind of the reason they made this signing, is to have a guy they thought could flourish in their pen, especially working with Katz and Bannister again. And the surface numbers are not going to look great probably by July, but he was getting his glove arm way high and his delivery was kind of throwing off his balance and he was not commanding well. They basically literally made the change his first outing with the new delivery, or the altered delivery is June 1st. He got plunked for that like Gary Sanchez like weak contact single, but otherwise is pretty good, and he's been like nails otherwise. John Bradby, when I asked him about it, made sure that I had to mention that the single was 69 miles an hour. He thought that was really important to include. But yeah, with what he's done career track record, and you can point to now a couple weeks and probably by July, no reason to think he'll not kind of keep it going, other than normal reliever reasons. I think it's pretty easy to say, like, this is John Bradby. This is a useful medium leverage reliever. Let's make it. There's weird incentives, but even if you add them all up, it's not crazy expensive and there's no commitment. Maybe they have to take a little bit off to get like a guy they specifically want, but I don't think it's anything crazy or a big hindrance to him getting dealt.
Michael Kopech, I have at medium. This is a classic. We could fix him from a team point of view, but you're in the middle of the season. Teams that are adding are in contention. The average four-seam velocity is just a tick below 99 miles per hour. That's 99th percentile. And Kopech's strikeout rate is north of 32%. That is good. But the walk rate is 13.5%. That is bad, especially as a reliever. There are serious questions that if Kopech even has a second pitch, I could see other teams maybe calling Chris Getz in the offseason about acquiring Michael Kopech. But before the deadline, I could see some teams being wishy-washy. James, regarding Kopech, do you agree? Do you disagree on the trade probability for Kopech?
I think that's fair. I mean, the counter to like another team saying we can fix him is like the White Sox could say like maybe we could fix him and he'll be more valuable next offseason when he's actually like a dominant closer. And yeah, it's weird to say that when he has another year of control, but like right now he's not someone you could super comfortably put in like your high. He couldn't serve the role he's serving at the White Sox and another team like the Walks, and the home runs are like too high to really entertain that. I think you could see him certainly pitching his way into late innings for a really good team over the course of the season, but will the Sox have to take too big of a ding with that to really get something they find meaningful when they say like, if we keep working at this, he just has been relieving for a few months. We could get him as like all-star level closer by next year. And then even if it's a rental, that's something a little bit more meaningful to us by next season. Or is this simply the talent that's being offered right now for him as a project is not worth, just shirking one of our assets or somebody who's at least keeping the lights on in the major leagues in the meantime, like if the offers are that low. I think with his fastball shape, there's going to be interest no matter what. It's an elite heater, and that's usually a great place to start. I think it's more likely than not, but if we're putting in three buckets, I would support putting in the middle one.
So, okay, because I was going to ask you, it sounded like you were almost to the certain bucket. Like, are you high?
I just think it's meaningful to put him in a lower grade than like basically pack his bags level guy.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we have. So Robert, low. Crochet, medium. Kopech, we got at medium right now. If he has a hot month, I think Kopech, to your point, immediately goes into the high bucket. Fetty, Pham, Dion, Bravia, we are certain that those four are going to be dealt before the deadline, which gives us a lot of work to do in late July. But that's good news for you guys, because that's more podcasts and writings from us at SoxMachine.com. It's going to be busy. It was busy last year for us before the deadline. Thank you, Keenan Middleton. It'll be busy again for the White Sox before the deadline. So those are the trade deadline power rankings. We will revisit this over the course of the next month. And who knows, maybe we'll add more players or trades will actually happen. But I think James is right. We'll start seeing trade activity pick up after the All-Star break, after the MLB draft. Back to the field real quick here. The Houston Astros series recap. There's not a lot to like dig deep into this series. It's just another series loss for the White Sox. They won the opening game on Tuesday. They won 2-0. They lost Wednesday 4-1, and they lost Thursday 5-3. Another seventh inning meltdown by the White Sox. It's the 15th loss this season where the White Sox had a lead going into the seventh inning or later, and they end up losing. But in this series, the big takeaway is Jonathan Cannon. And we talked about on our last podcast episode, James shared with us what Brian Bannister had to say about Cannon and how he felt about Cannon. And in his next start, James, Cannon does that. 8 2/3 scoreless innings. He almost pitched a complete game shutout. And if you're not on the Brian Bannister train, get on the train because, man, he's performing miracles right now. Of course, you got to give a lot of credit to the pitchers themselves to work through this. But Cannon was awesome. What did he have to say after the game, James, that fueled that success for him?
It's funny because Pedro was talking about we sent him down to the minors and we gave him some homework to do and he didn't pout. He took it seriously. He dedicated himself to come back here. And I think with the way he phrased it, a lot of media thought it was about mindset or maturity or handling the pressure of the moment and stuff like that. And go later, Cannon just said yeah, my stuff is a lot better, so it's easier now. He had a question. I want to pull up the right quote because I was asking him about the pitch changes, and he finally said I think the biggest thing is when your pitches have good movement, you get away with a little more. You can get away with bad pitches over the plate that have good movement on them. Sometimes they will get hit, but you will get away more with a pitch that has a good shape to it. That's been the biggest thing, trying to adjust some of those pitch shapes. I feel very confident where they are right now. Which is normally it's oh, I realize you can't make mistakes. Major leaguers up here, they'll hit them. You have to be on your game. And Can's no, they juiced up my stuff and now I can make mistakes. That's why it's good. And it was fun because when we spoke to Bannister, kind of the big fix they had been working on was, his sinker and changeup, where previously his sinker sank more than his changeup. So if he got you out in front on a changeup, you would get a changeup that stayed up and you're still able to whack it. And that's why he puts these almost hilariously off, especially now that he's better. The splits he put against lefties in his first 3 starts were insane. They were batting 550 off him with huge power. I don't think even if he didn't fix his pitches, he could keep that up because it was amazing how productive lefties were against him. Whereas now he's been a lot more even since coming back. But the Astros on Tuesday, they didn't have Kyle Tucker and they didn't have Yordan Alvarez as a way for personal matters. So they really didn't have any big lefties to threaten him with. It wasn't a huge test of what he worked on these past couple of weeks. He just sweeped them to death. And that sweeper is only kind of new, where he just learned it since spring training. Previously he was slider, and he's even, when I talked to him in the offseason, he's even working on a power curve. So the sweeper is just that's an old hat. That's something him and Bannister worked out 3 months ago. He's had that, but the fact that he's kind of refined these areas of this game in this, less than half of his season, to where he's having these hyper effective outings. I'm sure there's going to be adjustments to him. He's still somebody who depends on weak contact a lot, and he's not playing in front of the greatest defense or in the best ballpark to do that. So there will be rough nights, even if everything continues as it is. But I think it shows very impressive ability to kind of work with pitch modulations and adjust them and incorporate them really well, which speaks well to this was a guy who 6'6", great athletic starter build, always 3 strikes, was lauded for his command. The reason he slipped to the 3rd round was he didn't have bat missing pitches. So if this guy turns out to be really good at adapting pitch changes and adjusting grips and, commanding new shapes, that he's a really, encouraging lump of clay to be able to work with if he's going to respond to that well, because he already kind of had the things that are the hardest thing to get in baseball, which is fastball command. So I think it's really encouraging what he's done so far. And I thought it was a little out there when Brian Bannister was like, this guy's going to be one of the best starters in the league. But it's all smooth sailing since.
If he keeps pitching 8 2/3 scoreless innings every outing, yes, Brian Bannister is going to be right. The last thing to touch on regarding this series, I mentioned that this is the Hell's Gauntlet part of the schedule for the White Sox. My preseason prediction for this 38 game stretch was 8-30. The White Sox are currently 6-26. They only have to go 2-4 in their last 6 games of this stretch to match my preseason prediction of 8-30. And that next series for the White Sox, they go on the road and they visit our old friend Jason Benetti and the Detroit Tigers. I don't know what to make of the Tigers. They're currently 34-40. They're 13 games back of the Cleveland Guardians, and they're 6.5 games back of the wild card as they have lost 4 straight games. They're 3-7 in their last 10, which is the same identical record for the White Sox in their last 10. And the Tigers are not a good home team. They're 16-19. And pitching wise, they're a top 10 unit. They ranked 8th in Major League Baseball for wins above replacement for their pitching staff. But offensively, they rank 24th as they have a 90 WRC plus. And fielding, as a unit, they're at -5 defensive runs saved. That ranks 21st in Major League Baseball. And that's probably a good reason why the Tigers are 6 games below 500 right now, is that offensively they're not there, and defensively they're not very strong, helping out what is a strong pitching unit for the Tigers. And your pitching probables for this series, Friday night, this is a 5:40 p.m. Central Time start, good pitching matchup. Eric Fetty against Jack Flaherty, in which Flaherty's worth 2.2 WAR this season. He's got an ERA of 3 and already 100 strikeouts. So a breakout year for Jack Flaherty, or I should say a bounce back year from his good old days in St. Louis. Saturday afternoon game. This is a 12:10 p.m. Central Time start. Drew Thorpe will make his 3rd career start against Kenta Maeda, which Maeda has been having a rough season. His ERA is at 6. Sunday afternoon, 12:40 p.m. Central Time start. Jonathan Cannon, who we just spoke about, against Reese Olson. Reese Olson, 1.81, 1.8 WAR, a 3.39 ERA, a 3.04 FIP. His win-loss record, 1-8. So that's why win-loss record is not that important in these days, because Reese Olson's been pitching great, but he is 1-8 on the season. Poor Reese. Back to the Tigers in this particular series, because when we last saw the Tigers, James, it was opening day. The Tigers started 3-0, sweeping the Chicago White Sox. And I guess since they're 31-40 since that series against the White Sox, and the clock is ticking here, are the Tigers contending, James, or are they selling at the deadline?
I would think they're like a limited seller. I don't think you can get like Tariq Skubal or Riley Green. I don't think they're tearing it down. I think somebody like small pieces of the bullpen don't like upset what they're doing. If they put like Canna on the open market offensively, I think that'd be fine. Like, I would be a little surprised if they traded Jason Foley. I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Shelby Miller. But what I think would be interesting, as something that they probably should do, is, I think if they don't think Flaherty's coming back, I think cashing out on what he's done, especially with this health history, would probably be like the really bloodless move that their clubhouse doesn't love, but doesn't really alter their window in some big way. So that's probably what I'm most curious about, of like how hard they go. But I would think this is a team like where you flip the guys who are not going to be part of like even next year's team necessarily, but you're still with a lot of your young offensive prospects coming up, even if they're not all hitting yet, and still like a pretty strong pitching staff with a lot of young rotation guys headed up by Skubal. That's mostly the core you're still keeping in place, but doesn't seem like it's happening this year for, some of your clear win down pieces that don't have any value to you unless like they're contributing to like a playoff run right now.
Yeah, because our old friends, when we were back in our SB Nation days, bless you boys, it's a great Detroit Tigers blog. And I feel like out of Detroit, there's just a lot of confusion. Why is this not clicking for the Tigers? Why are they having this conversation now for the 3rd straight season that they're just sputtering? Or in this case, they're struggling to be at 500 with how well Cleveland and Minnesota and Kansas City have played this year. I mean, again, they're 13 games back of the division lead. That might be too far already to catch up, and we're at the end of June. 6.5 games back of the wild card, and one of those wild card teams is going to be the Yankees and Orioles. Like, I'm with you. I could see them being a limited seller, and with like Jack Flaherty. So Flaherty, if you traded him now, is owed $7 million for the rest of the season. There is no contract for 2025. And you also have the $250,000 incentives when Flaherty hits his 26th and 28th start, and he earns another $500,000 if he reaches 30 starts this season. Whereas Eric Fetty, yeah, you owe him for the rest of this season, and he's owed $7.5 million for 2025, but you get him for next year. So I could see where Eric Fetty's more desirable than even Jack Flaherty for the Tigers. But any thoughts regarding that? Like, why is this not working for Detroit, James?
They can't hit.
It could be as simple as that. I mean, that's why they gave that cash to Javier Baez, and that was clearly a mistake.
That was a mistake. I think putting the 1-1 on a generational bat to play like a non-defensive position and not getting like a major league out of it blows a pretty big hole.
Sounds familiar.
In what they're trying to do. I want to say like they're, especially for me, I think in the, I think there's some rumblings like Jace Jung got pulled from his game, but like a lot of like what I think is the most exciting like offense for him, and maybe the most exciting thing offensively for them is like Max Clark a couple of years away. But I don't really feel like you've seen like a lot of like the bulk of like the position players that the position prospects like Colt Keith like started to come out a bit, but I don't think you've seen those guys really hit their stride where I thought like them really popping this season was super reasonable or expectable. I felt like they were a year away from making a bit more noise in this division just based on where their offensive prospects were, where they're all kind of in this mix between AAA or just making their introduction now, where they just called up Justin Henry Malloy fairly recently. It felt like, yes, like the pitching feels really ready and you don't want to waste a year of like Scooble's prime. So they really wanted to like, be a year early team. But I think from their offensive core standpoint, it didn't seem like everything was there yet. And certainly Torque not building off of last year and Javi Baez going further in the tank only reduced their margin for error.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of confusion in Detroit from their fan base on why this is not working. And 2024 looks to be another lost season for the Tigers as they're currently in 4th place, and they're solidly in 4th place. They don't have to worry about finishing in last in this division. And if they do, something tragically happened in the second half of this season for the Detroit Tigers. But it is something that's been on my mind. Like, why is this not working for Detroit? And maybe there are lessons to learn from the Tigers whenever the White Sox decide to be competitive again. Obviously, we'll be recapping these games on SoxMachine.com, even though Jim is away. James and I will have that covered for you guys, so we'll watch the White Sox so you don't have to. But we'll be also recapping in the next podcast episode Sunday night on what happened against the Tigers and look ahead to the next homestand for the White Sox, which kicks off 3 games against the Dodgers and the makeup game against the Atlanta Braves. So that's one way to end this gauntlet. And then a little treat. They get a home series against the Colorado Rockies, which would be much needed for the White Sox. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen to our show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work and want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Your Patreon support supports James in a big way, allows him to go travel and cover the Chicago White Sox, and now we have a beat reporter getting this insight. And again, the next 30 days are going to be really busy for us at Sox Machine because we're going to be really busy for the Chicago White Sox. So again, if you want all access to our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and maybe you just really like us and you want to help support us, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $5 and there are annual discounts. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.